All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm honored to be joined by somebody whose music I remember listening to when I was a freshman in high school on the bus, on my Walkman, listening to the Minutemen. So all these years later, I'm thrilled to connect with this man finally. It's my great joy to welcome Mr. Mike Watt. Mike, good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
Glad to be aboard. Thank you so much for thanking me.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. And you're one of these guys I can talk to for hours and hours about your history. And I know, neither of us have that opportunity right now, but I wanted to connect with you because you've got a really beautiful record coming out in a few days. Your
Well,
latest
part of it.
part of it?
Yeah, it's Mike Baguette. You're talking MSSV.
Oh, yeah, you bet. You bet.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm the bass player in that band. In fact, a very unique way. Usually when I help a guy, I learn the dead, well, or the gone guy, but he's usually dead. Yeah. But with MSSV, Mike Baguette, not even D Boone wrote me bass parts. Mike Baguette writes my bass parts. He writes Hodges' drum parts. Like we're gonna go prac him. He sent us okay, the last two albums, like this album here and the one before it, they're actually done on the last day of the tours.
mm,
What a way to prac. It's a great idea. Mike is 20 years younger than me, but, he booked the tour himself. Even though, he don't come from the old days of the movement, and he's like schooled kind of traditional in a way with musicians, right? Institutions and stuff. But he's adopted ways that we learned because of the movement. Chuck Dukowski, Greg Ginn, and SST, and Book and Black Flag. And I remember playing with Black Flag in New Mexico. Uh, but anyway, so last day, the last gig of the tour, the next day is the album, man. We get all first takes because we've been doing it all tour. So me and Hodge right now are working on the 6 songs for the next album, but we'll play all on and on.
yeah, yeah.
It's the record you're thinking of. I've got a record. I've got a few records. Because of the internet, you can do more with the internet than just spread lies and hate. You can collab with guests. And
Yes.
in fact, you were talking, listeners, you don't know, but we were talking before this about Kay. And actually, these ethics about collab started with the first Dose record because she had Black Flag and she graduates UCLA. She has internship in Yale, Connecticut. So we both have the same 4-track players and we send the cassette tapes through the mail. That's how we put together. So even though it's not the internet, it's not wave files, it's the same idea. It takes a little longer. But this idea of making music work, that was the idea of We Jam Econo. It wasn't really a slogan. It was actually a way of doing things. So uh, Mike Baguette picks up on this stuff. I mean, from what he tells me, he's tried 10 years in New York City to do it that kind of square job. I mean, for that racket, for the music racket. And yeah, for some reason, we came together by a friend of Nels Klein. That was actually Connect. Chris Schlarb, who's got this studio in North Long Beach, right? Wants to start a label. So he asked Mike Baguette, will you do it? And Mike Baguette said something, well, he told me, well, if you can get Jim Keltner and Watt a chance to get to play or record or do it, be in the same room with Mr. Keltner. He ended up getting to do it twice. But that was incredible. And then, of course, he's a little more of a veterano than I or Hodge. Hodge is 5 years older than me, and I'm 67. But so Hodge is actually on my first opera with Nels Klein, contemplating the injury. See, people ask me about the old days. I say it's about people, but I think the new days is about people. I think it's always going to be about people. So the connects, right?
Right.
So this guy from, yeah, Western Mass, actually Jay Maskus territory. And yeah, I get involved and I've done these. Now it's going to be the third tour where you make an album on the last day of the gig. And it is a trip because usually you get the record done for the tour, or Minutemen case, it always missed the tour. and come out after the tour. Everybody was trying their best then, but in a way, that's where Mike Baggetta kind of benefits from our earlier things. And plus, yeah, it's, there's this kind of circumstance thing. If you weren't born in the same time, that means you're lamer. I mean, Sly Stone said something that was really interesting. He said, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. And for sure, nobody picks when they're born. But here's another, not to get all aphorism on you, but maybe that aesthetic is informed by the ethic. That's kind of the wee jam Econo thing, too. It's not about get Econo with ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to make it so it can happen and don't stay in pipe dreamland. And so it's trippy how it also shows you it's an interesting thing. I heard him talking to a press man about his music. He said post-genre. That's right up my alley, because I saw this kind of with punk. That's why he said punk. It's such a weird word, right? A guy who gets fucked in jail for cigarettes. You're going to call your music. It's not really, later on it got to mean fast music, strange clothes. There's always the strange clothes like that, but it wasn't always fast music. It was whatever you get up on stage. And then it was about taking turns and fanzines and, what Walt Whitman did in 1855, put out, his own book of poems. So many kinds of things, but you didn't reduce it to gulags of categories, Berlin Wall kinds of things. So when he said to that pressman, post-genre, I know a lot of marketing cats might, oh man, you're going to make my job harder. But for everybody else, this is liberating. And for especially Watt, man, that was music to my ears. So, because I'm saying this because you didn't have the negative. I didn't see your face all like scowl out because I say he wrote my bass parts. People get all almost like belligerent, defensive. Like, why do you let them do that to you? But what about, you start changing the script of a play you're going to do? Or, there's all kinds of things to be more than one of to do monologue. And, especially in an ensemble musical thing, you're trying to develop an interesting conversation. And if that means the rudder man has got an idea for the cat on the keel, near the keel, on the other side, the dry side of the keel, then that's okay, because I found out it's about taking turns anyway. And I've been in so many situations with music. One, I got to thank D. Boone's Ma for putting me on bass. Because it's trippy, right? It ain't really been defined, and you're kind of like glue. And what's glue without sticking to stuff anyway? Just a puddle. So you need Mike Baggettas, you need Hodges, you need D. Boones and Georgies, and from Ohio. Interesting thing. I'm part of a band in Europe called Il Sogno di Mainaio, 2 Italian cats. And the cat who put out the record, they said, what? You should do this music thing just man alone. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But anyway,
Yeah.
just the record straight. Let me preface your cues for my later A's on that, because, yeah, I think he thought it was my record. Well, I'm part of it. He wrote it, my parts for me. He wrote Hodges for him to make MSSV. And it's short for main steam stop valve.
Right.
There's a heavy concept in this book by Richard McKenna called Sand Pebbles, which I didn't know was even a book until I was I was helping the Portal for Pyro guys in 96. And when I was a boy, though, it was me and D. Boone's favorite movie, Steve McQueen in a sailor suit, but we couldn't tell what it was fucking about. It's trippy. But we still dug it. Ain't that weird? Cinema's trippy.
Yeah.
With a book, it's hard to go through a whole book and not know what the fuck's going on. With the movie, you just let, I guess, the eye gifts batter you down, because we had no idea. And then when I read it, well, here's the first thing that tripped me up. This is why I thought Mike Baggetta should read it. I could tell a sailor wrote, my pop was a machinist mate. And This is going to be Mr. Michener talking about Hawaii because he spent a month there. I could tell from reading, I was walking around the morning like I did, walking the bourbon off in those days, and used bookstore. And I've read the first page, hello, ship. And I just could tell that a sailor wrote this. It turns out he's a machinist mate, engine room guy like my pop. And then getting into it, whoa, a lot of things resonated with me. It was just something. And so I thought Mike would get a perspective on me that maybe he didn't know through what he knows of records and music and my gigs. I know it's weird. Here, read this book and maybe you know something about it. Written by a guy, who didn't know me, Mountain Home, Idaho, But yeah, there's a part of the plot is they got coolies doing the work. It's in China in the 20s when they're going through their thing, trying to become a republic and warlord thing. A lot of unequal treaty stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of coolies doing the work, but they won't teach them the theory behind the work they're doing. They just get them to copy things. He don't like this. So he takes on this cat and he uses dragons as a metaphor for steam. When the guy gets it, that's the eureka moment. And there's that kind of stuff with music and arts, when they're communicating things. So I just thought, and yeah, main stem stop. Wow. Okay, it's funny the way he says it, and it got on me in the boom when we saw the movie. This actor from Japan called Mako, which coolie guy, but it was like the light bulb goes on. Being the boss, you can beat things into people, but that's not real. When they get it, something special. That to me is a real human connect. Not just pulling rank.
That's an excellent point because, I think some people do get their heads tied up in that whole, I'm the bass player, I'm the drummer, I'm the singer. Look, you're there to serve the music. The music is the muse. The music is the engine. The music tells you what it needs. You don't tell the music what it needs. It's the other way around. So if you've got to switch your cap, put on a different uniform and to do that, it's your responsibility to do that because you're serving the music, not the other way around.
I totally agree. So, yeah, engine room of a boat in China in the 20s and being in a post-genre in the 20s. You know what I mean? Ethically, even aesthetically, not a lot of chasm in between. Grand Canyon, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Definitely.
So it's the arts, I always ask question on my Watt from Pedro show. Did you do something when you were a kid, like in the choir or the marching band? Because schools get rid of the arts programs, right? It's not necessary. What's that about? That's why I'm asking that question. Flea set up his conservatory of Silver Lake music because he went back to Fairfax High where he learned trumpet. He got rid of it.
Yeah.
So, well, people got different opinions on what's useless,
Yeah, unfortunately. But, there's still younger people finding it somehow. And like you mentioned earlier, the internet is not just about complaining, it's about action. I mean, we're doing this. When I wrap up with you later today, I'm trading tracks with a buddy in Norway. We got a record coming out, So that's kind of in some ways like the new schooling. It's more of a social education as well now because you've got to connect with people, you got to talk to people. It's not just about the whining and complaining. People are using this to build something, and that's the beauty in this whole thing.
Well, it's the ethic, fanzines. That was our whole scene, right? All the whatever rock and roll, not Little Richard rock and roll, but wannabe arena rock, Nuremberg rally shit, glossy thing, paid with ads and all this stuff. So shield them, lots of shield them. Fanzines, right? It's the fabric of our scene. Even for Torn, right? That cat, he's going to find the venue. He's probably going to open up. You're going to conk at his bat. fabric. And in fact, when the internet came, I thought everybody's going to have their own website, just like a fanzine, no middleman. But what happens? They start flocking to the corporate. Pat Boone sold many more Tutti Fruities than Little Richard. You know, it's just there's all kinds of sides to us humans. Some of it's so inspiring. Other stuff really is.
Totally. And you're bringing this music to the people soon. I know MSS.
Two gigs in 52 days. It's my 72nd tour.
Let me stick on that for a minute because looking at your tour itinerary reminded me about a year and a half ago was the last time I was in touch with Henry. I was in touch with Henry to work out an interview, which we ended up doing. But, what's the question with Henry? Okay, when can you get the guy? So I'm looking at his itinerary, and he's got 2 months straight out, no days off. I'm looking at your thing, very similar. You two guys were doing that 40 years ago, man. The same schedule.
Black Flag was the teacher, yeah, Greg and Chuck. You ain't playing, you paying. But actually, I'm reading this book right now on Lester Young and vaudeville. And before that, minstrel. Actually, minstrel's the granddaddy. There wasn't radio, there wasn't TV. You had to go to towns and play for people. That was the only way they were going to get stuff, especially what they called the territories, where, when he's playing Count Basie and those people out in the West, not big towns, lots of space in between, and there's no central media. You actually got to play for people. In fact, he's from the first generation where they're learning off records. You literally had to see guys play, but see, so everybody's always on the cutting edge of something, but then they're also standing on the shoulders of old past pioneer rock, and that's me and Hank's from that. Yeah, but they are too, like John Coltrane said about Lester Young. That's why I'm reading about him, and he talking about Frankie Trombauer, who I didn't know of, But John Coltrane says something about music being a reservoir. So maybe all the arts are doing things creative. It's like a big reservoir. And you might know some layers of who listened to who, but not all. And it's, forever reverberate. And then you're like Joey. One time Joey Ramone told me that he thought punk was like a big hay wagon that had room if you had ideas. Come on. Well, he's talking about the next shift, let alone the last shift or this shift we're on. It's so I'm just trying to put me and Hank in perspective. Sometimes the only thing new is you finding out about it. There was a great band from the city called Black Humor that had that in the early 80s. Because you know what I mean? And it's very important for you to find out for yourself. But a lot of stuff, which is great. That shows you it might not be trivial. Vincent only sells one paint, so sometimes there's no justice in the moment, but who knows down the road?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, man.
And so that's what we're from. And if you're going to go out and do it, we want to make the most of it. We also found out you never know when your last gig is, your last tour is. And who wants to swing halfway, right? If it's your last time at bat. Not to get all weird or anything, but, ethically.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right, man. I'm looking forward to checking out the show. I'm going to catch you guys up here when you hit. And, just to let the viewer know, the album's, again, it's called On and On.
Yeah.
MSSV comes out March 7th, I believe.
Yeah.
There's a digital version, which is an 8-song recording, but the vinyl, I know, is kind of a trip. It's a whole different thing, pretty much, right? You got some extra ingredients.
That's the boss. That's Mike Vegeta. I stand by it. I like his calls. Really interesting. Like, here's the thing, kind of, it's a lot different in other ways. D. Boone would show me a song, or I'd show him a song. We didn't have to teach each other the parts because we grew up playing together. First gig we saw was T-Rex, right? 15. But we didn't edit each other's words. But man, it was quite a privilege to be on his. Well, like sometimes he'd give me some words for me to write. I'd ask him for words because I'd start playing the same kind of music. And if Georgie too, really important, they gave me words, I would play different.
Mm.
D Boon never wrote a song for my words, but I wrote a lot. Here's the thing was though, if they rhymed, I wasn't going to get them. They'd have to be the stream of conscious things, you know, because if they're rhyme, he was keeping those. But you know what I mean? There's a lot of ways to collab. And like another thing I said, I've learned life is about taking turns.
Mm.
You give here, go there. Yeah, it's really interesting. So his call on these records, uh, really interesting. You know, I know he's thinking of me on Hodge all the time when he's doing this. And him, the way we look at it is like this at the end of this tour, gig number 53 is the next album. That's what we're looking at it. But then the way it ends coming out of the oven, yes. We'll be touring that, get ready for the next one.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And this combination of musicians, man, it just works so well. I got to bounce off that topic though for a second because, you know, obviously when you're playing with a different musician, you have a different language with whoever you're playing with. That's just part of the DNA of being a musician.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked a little bit about Kira before we started recording. You know, I love Kira to death. I was just talking to her earlier. So let me throw this one at you because you guys do dose, you know,
Yes.
and you know you're a bass player. Obviously, she's a bass player. So how would you define that kind of language and communication you have with her? Because you're both, you know, playing
Yeah.
this thing and having that
Well, and
conversation.
also the very narrow spectrum of the frequency range. So you really have to set up the other person. I mean, you have to do this with other instruments too, especially the kick drum. The closest thing to it with the other instruments is the kick drum.
Hmm.
In fact, I was on this radio with the Dodger radio. They, hey, what's this thing with the bass? What? Well, I'm trying to dance with the kick drum. Oh, okay. You know, because it's hard. You know, you don't want to get too muso on people, but you got to make spaces. We're not separated like cymbals and kick drum, huh? We're living in the same space. It's very with bass guitar. It's really narrow. And if we want to keep it true to bass, which BK and K was really into, it wasn't like somebody's going to be for the fake guitar. We're going to try to make now. Duke Ellington used two basses, and then John Coltrane kind of did that too. And so you got to have both in mind. It's not like, hey, I see you at the finish line. So we called it playing the holes. Make spaces for when you're composing. You're actually making places for them to go in. And it was an interesting challenge. I'd been in a side project before. You know, we started Dose when I was still a Minuteman.
Mm.
And so it was, you know, I thought all the music I could do in my life, I could go through D Boon. So we were going to do this, make it way different. You know, just not here's my song and D Boon just come up with a part. It was like, no, construct this for two basses. And it was a challenge, but I think, and in fact, it was also great for me when I lost D Boon because I didn't know Edward. He came from Ohio. And so I repurposed some Dose songs that became the first fIREHOSE songs. You believe that? So she helped me out big time. Those were the roughest years of my life. They were really hard for me. I can't even play the music hardly from those days. But the Dose thing really took some music things. It got me thinking about, yeah, like you were saying, you play different with different people. I didn't have to do that with D Boon. I took it for granted almost. Anything I could play, that cat could come up with something. But sometimes, especially with the words, I would write things for him to say. Sometimes it didn't even have. There's this one song, Expected I Gone, when he said, I have him say big fucking shit right now, man. It has nothing to do with the rest of the song. I just want him to say that there. So in a way, it was a little script writing, a little movie. But she got into with, you know, she's got Oscars and Emmys from teaching herself Pro Tools. And yeah, I kind of was doing that with the spiel thing. But music wise, I wasn't thinking of the other person. Dose is where I first started. And you kind of had to because we were very close frequency wise. The bass thing is very narrow. But, like running in the sand, you build up some strength. You put challenges like that for you. It was actually going to help me with, Edward, and then help me with composition and stuff. I ended up writing operas and coming up with parts for people. Whoa, that I never met, I didn't grow up with. You take that for granted. No, that was a long time ago, man. Whoa, and I'm really by taking on stuff where people just give me stuff to play bass to, it's really helped me. The internet, in a way, I've done the thing where you're in the studio as the sideman with it's all done and they're all staring at you. You got to listen to it, come up with a part, then perform it. Man, that's like, you can tell why some people have to go for but when you're by yourself, it's more like the lab. You can put another shot. And it's really interesting. There's lots of different ways to be creative. And Dose I guess I was doing it with Minutemen too, but it was always me and D Boon, right? That's the way, and then Georgie, that's the way I was thinking of it. But with Dose, it was like, I have to, maybe go first. Or when she brought more songs than I did at first. She had a big thing with her. She had two young nephews, and she wanted music for the stories that she read them. Yeah, Kay's always practical, so we got to make some soundtrack to this, So actually, Dose wasn't just up in the clouds; it actually was anchored to being the soundtrack. Like the Rabbit and the Porcupine, the titles on the first records, those are actually stories that she's reading her nephews, her little boys.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful stuff, man. I know you've got Prac coming up soon, so I don't want to keep you glued here for too long, but I got to ask you about one other musician because he's one of my favorite drummers. I'm a drummer. As far as I'm concerned, he's on that Mount Rushmore, or should be. And you've worked with a lot of great players. Got to give a salute to Mr. Hurley, of course. But we got to talk about Scotty Asheton.
Oh yeah, Scotty.
I mean, how was that relationship? Because obviously,
cat too. He was deep into nature. The I Ching, he gave me a thing. First time I read that was from a thing he gave me. But his drumming, oh man, Hank. I remember Henry talking to me about him seeing the Stooges. He was going that, a snare drum hand. He couldn't, really got him lit, man. Much dust got kicked up in Hank's mind by that. It was, and to get to play with him, man, 120. Well, the last 2 years got the sciatica thing. I couldn't play, and Larry came on to help, but Larry was playing Scotty's parts. And there's a thing too with Scotty, because Ig's the drummer first. That's where his name comes from. So he teaches Scotty so he can be the singer after seeing Lou Reed, Velvet Underground. Yes, they told me, I was finally the youngest guy in the band. I asked these guys 10 million questions and say he's playing oil cans. And he learns them. It's, like I said, about people. But he had a really neat way of playing drums, man. I would be always right by the riser thing, or the lower the riser, the better, because I like being right with him. And I love the way he signed his name on the drum set. It was really interesting. It was really easy to get rocking with him. And he called it stooge music. And it is stooge. I mean, sometimes there's one chord, people all three chords, like that's the simple thing. They got one chord songs, TVI, Funhouse and stuff. It's all about the feel. In fact, it really helped me. But then, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, right? That's the riff in Little Doll. The thing I used after the sickness that almost killed me to get strong again. I didn't play. That's the first time I stopped playing bass since D-Boom Ma put me on bass, and I couldn't play. And Little Doll over and over and over. and then getting to play with the man, you know. Ronnie too, man. Very singular. And Ig, oh man, those guys you know, that's the way I see uh, people in the arts. They're you know, they're personas in the way they express themselves. And Scotty he's one of the guys that convinced me that bass was not four-string guitar, like some cats tried to brainwash me. No, it's four-string drum set.
Mm.
Here's my proof. I mean, baritone guitar, you know, it's tuned down an octave lower. But man, it don't sound like the big strings. It don't have that kick drum, them toms. You know, the way you can telegraph, you're communicating through the song by, you know, getting people into parts, getting people out of parts. You know, with your, sometimes you call it rollitis, the rolls. But I mean, there's a messaging going on with that kind of stuff. It's not just about holding time. Well, that's interesting too, especially a cat like Milford Graves or stuff. And their stuff was like that too, man. Or even Charlie Watts, right? Honky Tonk Woman. I mean, that ends up about 10 times faster than it starts. And it should, right? Maybe. Whatever. It's trippy about that, man. You learn about life by learning how to play with a cat with a good spirit.
Yeah.
Scotty, I love that, man. Miss him so much. Thank you for bringing him up.
Oh yeah, man. Love the Stooges. Love the Ashtons. You know, I mean, that's part of my DNA. I've got a Stooges tattoo. I mean, it's in my blood for
His tattoo, you know, that star. You told me about that story. One thing. Because they're in Hollywood to do the Funhouse album, 1970. You can't get a tattoo in Hollywood then. He has to, now we're the west side, LA Harbor. The east side is Long Beach. And there was this heavy part called the Pike. That's the only, he had to go to the Pike to get that tattoo. Had the star on his shoulder.
Yeah. Hey man, he was a Detroit musician, you know, as tough as they come, you know.
He was, but he also really big heart.
Mm.
Talk really like around people, not a lot of words, man. But me and him spent a lot of time together, man. And his mind, he was big thinker, man. Ronnie Beautiful too, about history more. Brother Steve with the politics, Ig with culture, all them Stooges cats. Really, like I said, I was finally the youngest guy in the band, and they were like the older brothers I never had. Me, D. Boone, and Georgie, all the oldest guys in our families, you know, and different thing. But that's what life's about, taking turns. And that was like going right to the well. No middleman. Talk about no middleman. Man, that's right there. Those guys so beautiful to me. Let me help them like that. I thought it was going to be one gig.
Mm.
Coachella, right? 126 months. Love it.
Well, I love that stuff he did with them. It was a great way to, you know, say goodbye to the Stooges, you know, and keep the last chapter of that legacy strong. I think really.
We got to say the last chapter, which surprised me, but he was nice to me too. You know? Yeah. That Rob, I still think that shake appeal is pretty good. Man, he told me he never played a wah wah before he had to do some of Ronnie's songs. So
Mm.
James was learning from Ronnie, and Ronnie wrote. He's on bass for all that, and he's got some good, way good. And Scotty, man, I mean that I got it right. Didn't make the album right, but that me and Don Bowes was just talking about the Germs drummer. That
Yeah.
is, it's not oompa. The real punk beat is I got it right. In our book.
Yeah. Listen, that Stooges, man, that's going to school. You listen to those records, you learn something new every time you listen to them. At least I do. You know, I mean, those are
I still do.
supernova human beings on
Me and
record.
Larry, the guy who helped the last 2 years, he helped Ig in the 90s, right? We've been doing these tribute things, instrumental 7 inches. Well, we did a 40-minute version of We Will Fall. That's going to come out next year.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's something perfect in just hearing that. I can't wait for that. That's going to be great.
I do fuzz bass we don't use the actual spiel, right? I do fuzz bass to do the thing and on org music. We've done one for 69, 70, TVI, and Funhouse, and now we're going to do We'll Fall. And those are all like 4-minute versions, A side, B side. And now we're going to go for the 40-minute Big Daddy.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Long live the Stooges,
I
man.
mean, yeah, I mean, without Stooges, we wouldn't even have this movement. Those cats, Cat Beefheart too, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think that's another
Because
one.
these cats, I think, were kind of doing that then. And Walt Whitman, all
Yeah.
these guys.
It all connects, man. Like you were saying earlier, we all take what we need from people and grow and try new things, man. That's what it's all about. But I know you've got some things coming up, my brother, so I don't want to keep it too long, but I appreciate your time. I love the new record. Please give my best to the fellas as well. And I'll be seeing you up here when you come up to New England. I'll be seeing you for sure.
Okay.
Excellent. Be well, my friend. Take care.
We keep the keel in the water.